Hello everyone, this is Terry Mitchell with the Voice on Fire interview series, my interviews with intention. And if you've not followed along before, I like interviewing people that I find quite fascinating. They're people that are usually on a mission to make a difference in their local area or perhaps even across our global village. And today's guest is certainly in that category of change agents. I'd like to welcome Farhat Firdous to my Voice on Fire platform. How are you today?
I'm great, Terry.
Excellent, excellent. No, that's my pleasure to have you on board today. I'd love to have a conversation with you that we share with our audience about what it is you do, who you do it for, and why you do it. So let's start that ball rolling. I'd love to share with the audience what it is that you do.
Great. Thanks a lot, for Terry, for this opportunity. So I'm at the moment currently sitting at the land of Kurnai Nations, and I acknowledge their elders, past, present and emerging. I'm very privileged to be in Gippsland, Victoria, in Australia. It's a lovely country. I'm a very recent migrant, so I migrated in 2013. And I didn't migrate. I came as an international student and studied counselling. I guess before I came here, I was already an advocate for human rights, for gender equality and equity, and for children who have gone through domestic abuse or sexual abuse or harassment in their lives early on. So I guess I brought that rich sort of commitment to various issues in my home country from Pakistan. And I came here again, to learn new things, because I felt while working there that, we do need a lot more understanding of mental health, the trauma and how people suffer through their lives based on an experience that they may have early on. So while I was studying here in Melbourne, lucky, I developed interest, obviously, further knowledge and understanding of mental health issues, and I started working in mental health, and decided to move to a regional area, a rural area, where there are not as many services or as many, people to help those in need. And I guess I felt really privileged to hear several stories of my clients and learn from their experience. And I felt more and more committed and passionate about maybe giving the voice to people who may not have a voice. And that's where the Voices on Fire or Voice on Fire really relates to me, because it's really about amplifying those experiences, those voices, to the any platform that you have, like whether it's my region or whether it's Victorian government or whether it's Australian government or whether it's global, because I think the human challenges and human suffering are same across. There might be different reasons and causes, but they are experienced similarly despite our very different stories. So I think that over time I've developed my skills in advocacy and presenting the voices of underprivileged and people who may not have the platform or the articulation of their experiences and their suffering. So I am in the intro that Terry wrote. Thank you, beautifully. I did run in the local government elections last year, and again, it was a learning curve for me. I didn't get in, but I think I was able to highlight some of the issues that I think can really change people's lives, like mental health, like community spaces, the connection, the need for connecting beyond our own little boxes that we create for ourselves and help others. So I think my passion is really that connection, that creating those communities where people feel safe to be themselves, and then enjoy their lives and reach to their maximum potential.
Yeah, that's lovely. And it's so important. I hear that the strongest part of your message is about human connection and also about mental health. And really, mental health, as I've understood it and as I've come to know it over the last few years particularly, it really doesn't matter where you're from. Mental health is an issue across the globe, and it may have, as you say, different causes or different reasons that it's come about, but humans are humans all the way through. They have mental health issues on every level, and it could be a cultural issue, it could be a governmental issue, it could be a financial issue, it could be a health issue. Whatever that issue, it really doesn't. It could be a combination of anything. but we all experience mental health challenges in almost the same way. And it's really important that we do, as you have pointed out quite rightly, we understand that, and that we are more connected beyond just our safe little bubbles that we've come to feel quite insular in. And they're important too. It's we do need to feel safe, but we also need to feel safe in reaching out and connecting. And I'd love to know a little bit more about what project you're working on.
Yeah, so I guess I'm working on several projects. One of them is similar to your podcast name or webcast name. It's called Voices for Monash, which is a project of active citizenship and democracy.
Yeah.
I guess we all hear and read a lot of media chatter about that, how the people are disengaged from the democracy or the government and not happy with that. But then if you're unhappy about something, and if you don't like the way that our governments govern us, then maybe we need to do something about it. So I guess for me, the obvious reason is that how do we stay engaged with the political process so that we can influence the political process? Because I think the power is in the masses. Power is not in few people who are sitting in our parliament. So if the masses are making these parliamentarians accountable, then we can achieve a lot out of it and make them respond to our needs. So that Voices for Phenomena started in Australia from Indi. It was the Voices for Indi, and we are trying to replicate that model in my region, which is Gippsland, and it's the electorate called Monash. And that's a pretty interesting and learning experience for me, and also finding my own voice in the process, because even in any group, when you work with a group of people, then you have different opinions. So how do you influence them? How do you get influenced yourself? And how do you negotiate? So I think it's what I'm learning through that process. I'm also involved in another project called Intercultural Exchange, which is a brainchild of mine. And I think the premises of that intercultural exchange group is around that we all have culture. We all are, enriched by our experiences in our own communities, whether it's Asian, whether it's South Asia, whether it's Africa, and several countries within Africa. I don't want to just put a label on Africa because it's so big and so rich in terms of their cultural practices, or whether it's Europe and, Americas or Canada. So I think we all bring our own culture. And I think if we can acknowledge that, we can create a level playing field for each other and say, okay, if we all are cultured people, then let's talk about exchanging it for building those beautiful human connections and building on our strengths each culture has. Because as I would, you may agree that, we all cultures are beautiful. They might have some strengths and they might have some other things that might not, align with the modern way of life. So how do we make use of those practices to inform us to become better human, better connected people and better connected communities for benefit of all of us? So I'll give you an example. On my street, there are at least two people that I closely know are from very senior age group, like 80 plus. They live on their own. Sometimes they need help in just putting their dustbin out. And I just think that that's a very small step that anyone can do. But do we do it as often as we need to? We don't. And I guess they have a lot to tell my kid, because my in-laws or my parents have died, but my in-laws are in back home in Pakistan. So my daughter doesn't have grandparents, and they have a lot to offer to my kid as grandparents, or someone like grandparents. So why can't we build those connections and bring the best out of people and say, let's just be help to each other? So I think that's what my ideal sort of situation is, where we would extend offers of support and where we would be happy to receive support as well. Because I can tell you, as a migrant and culturally diverse person in Australia, it's not easy to seek support, because you think that you need to be resilient, you need to survive, and maybe seeking help is a failure, which is not. So I think that's where the idea is, that if we can offer something, then we're more happy to receive something as well and create an exchange which is equitable.
Yeah, I really like that.
I hope I made sense.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. It makes so much sense. The idea that we need to re-engage with people, and social media and the use of computers and all that sort of thing has been amazing for what it can do for us. For example, I'm on one side of Melbourne, you're on the other, and here we are having a conversation, and it's fantastic. I get to have conversations with people around the world doing this, and absolutely love it. But at the same time, we I'm in this house where I live, and I'm almost laughing in a nice way that you mentioned you have elderly people living in your street, and when do we go out and pull their bins in or do something just a little bit nice for them? When I first moved into this house and recovering from a car accident, I still don't find it very easy to walk and struggling to put my bins out, but I get them out. I might be a little bit slow bringing them back in. I don't even have to even think about it because I go out and I look for them and they're already brought in. The little elderly lady next door does it for me without me even, I didn't even know. So I'm very thankful and very grateful, but it's that sense of, where does that happen? Where do we see that happen? Why are we not living the ideal neighbours environment, as in the TV show, we're all neighbours? But are we really? And in what way do we actually live out that premise of being neighbours? Are we neighbourly to each other? Do we actually consider the people over the fence? Are we engaged with the people next to us who may be different age group, different culture, different backgrounds, different family structure? At what point do we actually connect with them? And I'm finding that in my time in Melbourne, I haven't really found that people tend to not want to go outside their fence line. And it's very unusual for people to actually speak to the person over the fence in all the environments that I've lived in. So I would love to see a much more connected and much more humanly engaged society, particularly where people feel that the person in their street is their new, not best friend necessarily, but maybe a kind of like extended part of the human family. It would be fantastic to know that we could knock on the door next door, knowing that I have run out of sugar and grab a cup. That simplicity, we just don't seem to do that anymore. Is that what you're actually looking at in terms of the intercultural exchange?
Yes, and more. So I guess, I think I was raised in an environment where we would go and ask for that, we're finished with the salt. Could you, lend us two spoons of salt or oil? And then we would do the same when they have something finished. So I think that has really allowed us to have a bit of safety of, knowing that, while my mum and while my dad were on work, I knew that there were other people who were in the community who were looking after us. Do we have that community still? But also, on top of that, I think also that addressing the fear of other, because I know that I am the other where I live, and how do we help our people to connect over the similarities rather than the differences, and also celebrate the differences.
Absolutely.
Because if we are not different, then what do we have to add to the community, to that life, or to, how do we enrich the life? So I think just acknowledge that we are similar. We are all humans. We have got the same blood running in our bodies, but also what differences we have can add value to the culture of the community that we live in. And I think because of that fear of other, a lot of people just hesitate to make an eye contact or to offer you a smile or to say hello to you, because they think I might not respond the same way, or they don't know me. Or I might not do that the same because I think that, this person working with their dog might not be interested in my hello. So should I say it or not? I do say it anyways, that's just my habit. But I think that's where the beauty is. Also, I'll just give you an example of a project that I ran, a very small community-based project, COVID Safe, to address the social isolation. We ran a video project in which people were submitting their family meals, anything that they cook at home when they're free or leisurely, and make a video and submit a video to the project organizers. And we had around 15, 16 recipes submitted to us. One of them was very interesting European dish, and that was called frog in a hole, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
And I thought, what that dish was, like the name, I just didn't know before even I watched it. It was an elderly lady from European background, and she submitted that video, and she was so excited about that video because she saw that through that video she could connect with her grandchildren in somewhere in Europe and send them a shot of, like, the video to see what she could cook for them when she sees them actually face to face. And I said to everyone, I said, people raise question, is that culturally diverse? Is it something that you would include in social inclusion? I said, yes, because for me, that's a totally different dish, which I wouldn't go and Google and say, could I cook this dish? Because I don't know the name. So for me, that's cultural education. And that's where, for me, the enforcement of the idea that every one of us has culture and something to offer to the other person
Yes.
who's different from us. And through that, we can connect in a way which is way beyond our connection through just saying hello, how are you, and are you okay. I think that just connects you across those boundaries, and it's pretty amazing how I felt towards this woman. I just thought, so much to offer and so little to say.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. I think that's a fabulous idea. The idea that food is such a cultural thing and such a connector. And if we all have to eat, and when we're able to share the food, particularly if we're sharing with people who may not be in a position to have the freedom to eat 3 meals a day or eat nutritious meals. So it's just nice to know that we can do something and become connected and share food. And I think that would be something I'd love to see grow in our communities, where we not only grow the food in our own yards, but also make the food into, or make the produce into food that we can share with others. Again, I think the idea of sharing and getting to know people at a deeper level is something that is so missing in our society at the moment. And maybe it's been something that's been building over a period of time, but it's certainly strikingly obvious, and perhaps our COVID lockdown hasn't helped. But at the same time, when do we take the action to change that current dialogue? When do we make it something that we can address and be the person that says, you know what, I am going to step up. I'm going to be that person that acknowledges my neighbours and goes out and collect the mail for them and take it into their doorstep, or the little things that just show that we care and are available to be someone, people that the people can connect with and chat with and talk with. And those days just seem so strangely missing, and it would be so important to bring them back. And I think what you're doing sounds amazing, and it certainly sounds like something that we need to really bring to the fore. It needs to be a conversation that we have at the table, and recognise that differences are what makes us who we are and makes us interesting, and we need to be able to open up and have those conversations. And based on that being what you do, and obviously there's a little bit of a revelation there in who you're doing it for, but let's open up that conversation. Who are you doing these particular projects for?
I guess so I'll just maybe briefly talk about my work role. So I work as the Multicultural Strategic Engagement Coordinator for Gippsland. It's a government-funded role, and I guess in that role I entered with this assumption that I'll be helping people from culturally diverse people. And when I talk about culturally diverse people, it's migrants and refugees, and people who are on temporary protection visas, or working in the community on temporary working visas, all of them. And I think trying to understand and scope their challenges and their issues, I realized that we might look at them as a small group within the larger community, but they are part of the community. And if the bigger community is not feeling that they could welcome other people, then how am I going to really improve anything for my small group? So I think that I realized in the first year when I was just doing the scoping and trying to understand what could I do, is that how do we make sure that the communities are welcoming to this small cohort of people? And in that welcoming, I realized that people have to be fulfilled in their own lives to be welcoming others, not the other way around. By opening up to others, they will become fulfilled. I guess that comes at a later stage where you give up, where you give out, and you really share your generosity. But that can't come unless you are happy and fulfilled in your own life. So I guess I realized that to address any cohort, issues of any cohort, you have to really work with the mainstream community or the wider community. And I think that's where that understanding came from, that we need to acknowledge that all the people that are in the community needs someone to listen to them and someone to talk about their issues. And that's where I thought, maybe I need to be more involved within the mainstream community. So I started volunteering with local community house, or I started volunteering with a number of other groups, and really making those connections for myself, because I need to be part of the community before I can help others to connect with it. I think when I talk about the migrants and refugee, I think I see a number of challenges that are specific to that group of people, which is like, the language. They might not know enough English to be able to ask for help, to be able to advocate for themselves. And that's where it's really important for them to find a voice. And if they don't have a voice on the table, then maybe someone else have to present their voices and their concerns and their issues. So I think that's the role that I play on an ongoing basis, and I try and use my personal lived experience of isolation, of feeling, lonely, feeling depressed, because I'm trying to work in a community which is, which is gradually accepting me, but not fast enough for me to feel connected. And that's where I think if we have those spaces that I talked about earlier, like community hubs or libraries or safe spaces, where people could come and just connect over a cuppa, over a newspaper article or something, that could really change the feeling of well-being for a number of people, and for the host communities and for the new arrivals or settlers alike. I think I built a lot on my personal experience, because I think without me being authentic about my experience, I can't really help anyone else. So I have, early on in my life, I felt, I've experienced domestic violence, I've experienced mental health issues among my family members, close family members, and I've been a young carer. And later on in my life, that I have a number of conditions that I need to manage. And I guess through that learning about myself, I learned a lot about other people as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's an ongoing journey. I'm pleased to say that I don't hide that, because there are times, and you would be aware of the mental health. Mental health can impact you on one day, and then maybe for a year you would be fine, and then you would have another 6 months when you are impacted by that. So how do we normalize that conversation about mental health so that people can come out and say, this is not my best day, can I seek some help?
Yep.
And I think that help would only be sought and provided if we have the safety, psychological safety, of saying that I'm not well today. And that's not, that's a luxury that's not available to everyone at the moment. So I think by sharing my own experience of saying that, yes, after I gave birth to my daughter, I had a bad patch in my life. I lost my mother, and that was the patch when I learned about life most. But that learning comes at a price, and help people to feel that it's okay to be in pain today, because it's going to only improve your life in the coming year or in the coming decade. I think we don't value that learning through pain enough, and that's where we miss on reaping the fruit of that pain that we all go through just by a human condition and nature.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so relevant, that when we go through an extreme hardship or a very difficult time or a painful loss or other grievance that is very difficult for us to adjust to, it's very hard in those moments to know that it's actually something that's going to enrich your life. And you have to be of a mindset that allows you to see that it can enrich your life, but you've also got to go through the grieving. You've got to also be allowed to feel what you feel. And I think at the moment we're going through a society change that's almost saying, no, it's not okay for you to be miserable, because I'm going to consider that you're negative and I don't want to hang around negative people. People aren't necessarily negative by choice. Some people don't realize that they're presenting with a negative language style or a negative behavior pattern because the people around them aren't supporting them enough in saying something to perhaps positively help them address it. And I think what we lack at the moment is a connectedness that says, you know, I hear that you're not having a good day, and I'm really sad that you're feeling that way. Would you like me just to come around and have a cuppa, or can I call you, or can we maybe have a Zoom chat, or would you like just some time to yourself? Maybe, you know, we just don't seem to know how to have the appropriate conversation that lets someone feel heard so that their emotional state feels validated. And I believe, and I'm not sure how you feel about this, I think we're probably having a similar conversation, that if we were to acknowledge that someone is having a difficult time and we recognize that and share that communication with them, they're less likely to bottle it up, so less likely for it to become like a pressure cooker within themselves, so that it'll last not anywhere near as long, because they'll be acknowledged, so that's a good feeling. They have a chance to perhaps gain some information from somebody who may share something with them that might help them through the difficulty, and that allows them also to acknowledge just a general reality of natural grieving, which I don't think we do very well. So I wonder if that resonates with your thoughts.
It certainly does. And I think grieving is such a big thing, and especially in times like now, like I don't know whether have seen anything like what we have now in my 40 odd years. And I just feel that we are just obviously taking day by day and hoping to get through this time, but in the process I think we have acknowledged the power of relationships to a certain extent, and started valuing some of the things. I hope that we don't forget the lessons learned during COVID and keep building on these learnings, because I think it's really important to allow yourself to focus on what is really valued, like what it is that really helps me to stay maintain my energies or wake up in the morning and keep going. I'm very proud that I have a big extended family, as you can understand, coming from South Asian background, and we still have really strong ties to the families, like my family and my husband's family, and we are at times we are supporting them, at times we're seeking their support for us, to be doing what we do here in Australia pretty much on our own. We do miss on all the family and the beautiful things that the families do to each other. But I think what gets me going every morning is that I know there are people who would need me to keep going. And I think that the power of relationship is really important for me just to guide my own life. So I have always I've struggled with the concept of values when I came to Australia, and I thought, why do we have to talk about values all the time everywhere I go, mental health or psychology or counseling or community engagement. And with time I made peace with that. But from the very start, when even I struggled with the word values, I thought the relationships, the family is the most important things for me, and I would do everything and anything for them. And I'm really privileged that I can do a tiny bit for them by being here on my own, but really looking at that as my contribution to my family and to my communities. And I think if we could all realize a little bit of and acknowledge a little bit of that responsibility towards our families, our communities, we could make this world a really beautiful place to live for and live in. I think that's a task that needs every one of us. We can all be leaders, sometimes from the front, sometimes from the back, sometimes from the middle, but I think we all have to take that little by little and keep chipping along on that and help people who really need that support from us. So I think for me, it's really all through the life, it was about helping and supporting my mum and say, what can I do for you? Because I can see you are taking the burden of the family single-handedly. What can I do to help you or improve the situation? And then it was, other people. So I think you learn it early, but you can learn it later as well. So just really hoping that we could all take a bit and help our communities, but also our environment, which is really suffering at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really so important that we realise that in order to make progress in our society, we have to realise that society is made up of individuals and also made up of groups of individuals. And in order for us to be a healthy society, we need to let go of judging, we need to let go of labelling in the intense form that we tend to rely upon. We need to feel that it's okay to reach out and say, I'm having a difficult day today, it's not my best day. And the idea that our workplaces perhaps even need to recognise that sometimes the contract of employment that holds 8 to 10 days of sick leave is not enough. And particularly as life has changed so much, but perhaps it needs to be managed in a different way so that perhaps someone can still work, but maybe they can work in a different way on a difficult day, and acknowledge that people are human, people go through very difficult times, and it's more professional to be authentic and truthful than it is to put on a stiff upper lip and pretend that there's nothing wrong, and then in the end perhaps not even feel able to sustain the employment. So we have so many different things. It's such a convoluted and complex situation. I think it's really important that we find ways to re-engage with each other. And I'm hoping, as you've said, that we don't forget the lessons of COVID, that we realise there's much to learn, and we still have such a huge learning curve ahead of us.
Sorry, Terry, I was just really surprised this year. I was waiting for the statistics on the suicide in Australia, which
Hmm.
is usually very high. And this year, if you look at the suicide rate, it has gone down. And I
Hmm.
was just wondering, what have we done differently? Obviously, there's a lot that has been done differently. Obviously, the government has increased the benefits for people on payments, like, looking for employment or disability, or people who are parenting or caring for someone. They have given them income supplements, and that might have been one of the reasons. I was quite shocked and surprised by that. If people have enough to eat, they might
Mm.
not think about, or enough to feed their children, they might not
Yes.
think about the extreme measures like suicide.
Mm.
But also, I think we have really, during COVID, and that's where I really want to emphasize the learning part of the COVID, is that we have asked the question that, are you okay, more than ever. We
Mm.
have allowed people to take the time off and go for a walk and come back and then do the thing on your computer or Zoom
Mm.
or Teams. We have allowed people to say, okay, yeah, you don't have sick leave, but we will give you some extra time to go
Mm.
away because you have to take care for someone who's
Yeah.
ill or who's recovering from COVID or who's
Yeah.
recovering from other ailments. So I think we have become more kind and more compassionate towards each other and ourselves as well. So I think that it just really has got a lot to give to us if we can continue with that. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you say that, to know that thankfully the suicide rate in Australia is perhaps coming down. Who knows if that is going to be an ongoing downward run, because the way it has been, the way it's spiked, and it's an issue in itself, and it's something that would be so better handled if we as a collective society reached out to people and extended that kindness and just recognized people go through difficult times. And most people, and my background's in psychiatric nursing, and I've seen this, most people do not know how to cope with a bad day. They have their own coping strategies, and those coping strategies may be things that they learned when they were children and are still relying on those coping strategies because they don't seek help, they don't talk to anyone, they don't admit to the difficulties that they're going through. And it's so many other layers of complex situations going on. So I certainly hope that we are in a position where the world will start the healing journey, because it's still going. We've still got a lot of trauma going on in the world beyond just COVID. There's a lot of trauma going on, and we all need to collectively stand up and start saying enough's enough. Let's come together. We need to come together. So I think what you're doing in terms of your contribution to that sounds just so essential, and certainly I hope that you continue with it and it continues to grow and provide the support that you've been speaking about. I'd like to just take this conversation to the next level and ask you the final question. Why is it that you do it? We've talked about what you do and who you do it for. Why do you do it? What's your driving force?
I would just maybe go back to that, my experiences in my life early on, but also after migration. They both were very isolating. So I had a very isolated childhood in which things went on, and I, survived. I had developed maybe a survival sort of technique for myself and resilience for myself to keep going. So I'm neurodiverse, and as I mentioned, I do have a couple of conditions that I manage, sometimes with help, sometimes without help. And I feel that, I have at times I've felt I'm an anomaly, or I'm sitting on the fringes. I don't fit in a box. I don't
Yeah.
fit in this circle or that circle. And with time, I realized that what I have is different, and that's my asset, and that's my
Yes.
strength, and that's who I can. That's what I can
Yes.
utilize to help other people.
Absolutely.
Acknowledging their difference, identifying their difference, and then
Mm-hmm.
build on their powerhouse
Yeah.
on that
Yes.
difference. Because I think what's different really keeps me driving,
Mm.
and that's my persistence. That I
Mm-hmm.
might fail first time, I might do it again, and I might change my tack and change my
Mm-hmm.
strategy. And I think if I can tell people that I do have all these limitations,
Mm-hmm.
but because I'm different, that's my strength, and that's
Mm-hmm.
keeping me going. So
Yeah.
I think I just want to help other people who might be hiding behind their difference and thinking maybe they're not accepted in the community
Mm-hmm.
or in the world.
Yeah.
At times, those exclusions are put in from outside, and
Yes.
you are excluded from certain things, but at times it's put in from inside as well. And you think,
Mm.
because there is a perception of normal being, you might not fit the normal being. So I think that's what helps me to keep going. And that just drives me that, people who are thinking their English is not best, but they can communicate in English. Ask another English-speaking person to communicate in my language. They would know a word. They might know salam, they might know goodbye and say Khuda Hafiz, but they wouldn't know anything else. Absolutely. I know that. So that's their strength, that they can communicate in another language. For someone like neurodiverse, I think they have got strengths to offer. They can focus on sometimes, people with certain diagnosis, they can focus for hours on things and just really make beautiful things out of it. Sometimes computer programs or computer, geniuses, but they can, and that's building on their difference. So why not we acknowledge that we are a team, a human team, and just build on our differences to support each other. And I think that's the idea that we can. And whether you look at intercultural exchange and whether you look at my personal drive to work on certain issues, and they are very diverse, my interests, but I think that's the thing, that we all feel that our experience is unique. It is, but it would be shared among so many others. Why not connect to those so many others and become a force and become a team and tackle things that are bothering us as communities or as countries or as the world, universe. We can tackle the climate change if we want. I do believe in that. But the willingness is the actual issue. And I think the willingness would only come when we realize why it's important to do it for us. So I think it's a really good question that you asked, Terry, there. I think it's the why that we have to figure out. And it's not me. There are greater, bigger people who have said it. Simon Sinek, one of them. What's your why?
Oh, I think what you've said is so important. I think it comes down to when we do recognize our why, it helps to shape the foundations of our actions. And I'm sensing in the world, and I'm wondering if you'll resonate with this, I'm sensing that we have really become disconnected from our actions, in the sense that we can do some things, and that's take an action to do something, but we try to do it in the most, I suppose, detached way. So that, and I was talking to someone earlier today, and the example I gave was, if I make a donation and I put money into a money jar and that donation goes to help a foundation, I feel good because I've put money in and I know that that's my contribution. I've done something. What I sense is in that experience, and I even felt it for myself, it's a sense of disconnection. I don't know where the money's going. I don't know who it's helping, but I feel good because I've done it. But I'm distanced from the outcome. Whereas what I tend to do, and what I've been doing in my background, is I've been supporting a number of individuals and communities across Africa and other locations. And when I am providing a donation, I provide it specifically to the person who needs it. And I have the photos of where they've invested that money, and it's often with food, because oftentimes the children that they are taking care of don't have the food. And I get little video snippets where the little children are yelling out to me and saying thank you in the video. And it's just so heartwarming to know that I feel connected to them, and I develop a sense of responsibility. They're almost like my own extended family and children, and it's different to putting money in a jar. This is about investing in people's lives, and then I get to find out more about their situations, and those stories become part of my stories. And I think this is my experience, and I'm certainly working towards this being a more global experience. I think it's important that if we can get to know who it is we're helping in a more connected way, rather than the distant sense of, oh, it's just that country over there that's in crisis, and this big organization wants a donation and I'll give them a donation. It's fantastic. We still do need to do that, but we need to be invested in that donation, and we need to be invested in realizing we're helping people, we're helping animals, we're helping the environment. And if you've got children, you're helping the future planet that your children are going to live on and inhabit. And you have to ask yourself, what kind of environment would you want your grandchildren to know that you left for them? And I guess that's the big driving question for me that really sparks that sense of community and connection and giving, as you've spoken about, that whole sense of feeling more connected to the people around us. And I wonder if that is something that resonates with you.
I would say, I was just listening to you, what you were saying. I think for me, really the relationships are the key. I think that the future world can only be built if it's a safe future world for my daughter, for your kids, or anyone's, the young generation. It could only be built through the relationship, power of relationships. So the Australian government does provide us, the aid to Pakistan and to so many other countries. And I've benefited from that aid because I came here as a scholarship. But I think that if it was done through building a relationship with the people, it would have gone, far out
Yeah.
and really reached people and touched their hearts. So I think it's about those relationships, and how do we build, strengthen, and protect those relationships? By waging wars, we're breaking those relationships, and I think that
Absolutely.
just really makes me sad thinking about every Remembrance Day and every Australia Day. I think about, what are we celebrating? Are we celebrating the right thing? Are we just? I think for me, it is about acknowledging people who have lost lives in those wars, but I just think that it would have done a lot more good to the communities and to the world and to the universe if we had tried building relationships and made sense of how we can move on from the conflict that we have,
Yes.
resolve the dispute through that. And I know that it's not that easy. I'm just maybe making it simplistic. But if, like, think about 7 billion people, I can't be connected to 7 billion people, but I can be maybe connected to 700 people around me, in my family or in my immediate community. And if every one of the person is connected to 700 people, then we all are connected, aren't we? We
Absolutely.
would have maybe 3, 4,
Absolutely.
5
Yep.
amazing relationships. And that's
Absolutely.
what would keep us healthy. That would help us heal
Yep.
from all the colonization trauma, from all the war trauma. And it would allow us to live healthy, beautiful lives for longer, and protect our universe. I think that's a key for our future generations, for now, but also for future generations. Because when my daughter asked me what's happening to the Great Barrier Reef, I don't have an answer. I just feel I'm clueless.
Yep.
Because I don't trust the people who are taking those decisions. And I just think that maybe we need to act on it. If we are frustrated about it, then we act on it. And when I say act, it could be a really small act, just saying to another person, or helping my daughter understand better that how come she can reduce the consumption and reduce the wastage and reduce the shit, the dump that we are putting in our seas.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you've said makes so much sense, and the relationships are really critical. And as you say, we may be connected to 100, 700, 7,000 people, but if every one of us recognizes how many people are really within our circles, and then every one of those people is connected to someone else, we are all connected. We cannot deny that. We are all connected in some way, shape, form. We all have a relationship with somebody around the planet. And it's so critical that we recognize there's no time for putting labels on things anymore. This is not a time for escalating crisis and escalating conflict, which our government seems to be very good at doing. It's about being able to step back and say, how can we heal this? How can we heal this? What are the steps that we can take? Let's forget policies and procedures for the moment. Let's talk relationships and connections. How can we have conversations and communications that show that we are listening and that we care and that we want to make a change? And I think relationships it's what it's all about. So I totally agree with what you're saying. And I have one last really big question for you. It's a bit of a random one. I don't always ask this, but I'd like to know from you, what's your one big wish for humanity?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I would say, and I guess it's maybe I'm influenced at the moment by the 16 days of activism. I would say that we could start respecting people for who they are, like humans, not women and men. We become one, because I think I have experienced in my life gender-based violence, and I know how it damages. I'm lucky, I'm fortunate to come out of it by the blessing of my parents or my community or my education, or just by chance. But if we can take away that experience, like if someone says, I can take you back in your childhood and take away the experience of violence, I would say, I'll give it a go, because it does damage people. So I think if one wish, yes, we can treat people, children, women and men, for who they are and not be violent towards them. And sorry, I'm just getting emotional on that. You just touch a nod there. No,
It's It's a passionate and personal and very powerful subject, and I thank you for sharing that. And I think it's important that we recognise that respect is the one thing that we really need to nurture. And I think if we can do that, we have an amazing future for people like your daughter and people going forward. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time with me today on Voice on Fire. It's been a fabulous conversation, and I look forward to seeing how your projects develop, and we will share with the audience in the description for the YouTube video and also the podcast any links where they can connect with you if they want to reach out to you and have further conversations with you. And yeah, and I'll load this to the YouTube channel and podcast and also to iHeartRadio. So it'll be available for everyone to listen in to what a great conversation we've just had.
Thank you, Terry. Really appreciate it. And I just love talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You're watching or listening to Voice on Fire Interviews with Intention. If you're new to Voice on Fire interviews, you'll hear from everyday amazing people on a mission to make a difference. These people are change agents, action takers, and difference makers, having a positive impact on their local community or across our global village. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for updates on new interviews. I hope you enjoy.